Poor woman was left alone on Christmas for not being able to have children until a widowed billionaire with 4 girls chooses her and changes her life. Sarah looked at the ring on her finger. She spun it a final time before slipping it off. She was sitting on the edge of the bed in the cheap hotel room where she had spent the last week. The suitcase was open on the floor, clothes tossed in haphazardly. The wallpaper was peeling at the edges. The heater made an irritating noise but barely warmed the room. Her cell phone vibrated. It was his mother. Again, the 10th call in the last 2 hours. She disconnected without answering. 3 hours earlier, David had spoken the words that still echoed in her head. "I can't marry someone who can't give me children, Sarah. I'm sorry, but I simply can't." She had stood there frozen in the doorway of what had been their apartment, the key in her hand and a bag holding her last few things. He didn't even look her in the eye when he said it. He just took the key from her hand, went inside, and shut the door in her face just like that. Simple, cold, 7 years together. Wedding plans, promises ended in 30 seconds. Sarah had found out 2 months ago the doctor was clear, direct, no beating around the bush. She wouldn't be able to get pregnant. Uterine problems, irreversible. When she told David that night, he had held her hand and said it was okay, that they would figure it out, that they could adopt, that their love was bigger than that. A lie. All a lie. It only took him 8 weeks to give up on her. 8 weeks to decide she wasn't worth it. His mother had started making comments 3 weeks later. "Oh, but what about the grandchildren I wanted? David always wanted a big family." Sarah saw it in her eyes. She had never been good enough anyway. And David, he became increasingly distant. Went out with friends, came home late, barely spoke until today, Christmas Eve, when he simply said it was over. "So, you understand, right?" He had said as if he were being reasonable. "I've always wanted to be a father, to have my own children. I can't give that up." As if she were a bad job, he was quitting. As if 7 years meant nothing. Now it was Christmas Eve, and Sarah had nowhere to go. She paid her hotel bill with her last working credit card and stepped out into the biting cold of Manhattan. The streets were a whirlwind of festive joy that felt like a mockery. Families laughed, choirs sang, and the scent of holiday treats filled the air, highlighting her complete isolation. Her legs aching and her spirit broken, she collapsed onto a bench in Central Park near a brilliantly lit tree. As quiet sobs finally shook her, a small, clear voice pierced her despair. "Daddy, why is she all alone on Christmas?" Sarah looked up, quickly wiping her tears. A little girl with a red pom-pom hat and curious blue eyes stared at her. Beside her stood a tall, weary-looking man holding the hands of 3 other blonde girls, all bundled up against the cold. "Sophie, don't bother the lady," the man said gently, but his eyes held a kind, understanding sadness as they met Sarah's. "She's crying, Daddy," Sophie insisted. Embarrassed, Sarah mumbled an apology. The man, Matthew, studied her, her thin coat, her raw grief, and then the hopeful faces of his 4 daughters. He seemed to reach a silent decision. "Do you have somewhere to go tonight?" he asked, his voice low and genuine. Sarah simply shook her head, the word "no" sticking in her throat. The smallest twin tugged his coat. "Daddy, it's cold." "She doesn't have a good coat." The other twin chimed in, "She's going to freeze." His 5-year-old, Zoe, tilted her head. "Can she come with us, Daddy?" Matthew looked from his daughter's expectant faces back to Sarah. "You need a home," he stated quietly, then added, looking at the girls, "and they need a mommy." Before Sarah could process this unbelievable offer, he clarified it wasn't a proposal, but a chance. A place to stay for the night in his too-big house, a warm meal, and safety. Sophie eagerly introduced herself and her sisters. Overwhelmed, discarded hours earlier for being barren, Sarah now found a stranger and 4 children offering her a lifeline. With nothing left to lose and everything to gain, she took Matthew's outstretched hand. The house was a mansion in the Hamptons. Sarah entered a world of marble and crystal, where a slightly crooked Christmas tree stood in a beautiful but cold and silent home. The girls, however, burst in with life, their chatter immediately filling the void. In the massive kitchen, Sarah gently took charge of making dinner, effortlessly managing the girls' excited questions and requests. She cooked, served, and cared for them in a way that felt instinctive. At the dinner table, laughter echoed for the first time in months. Later, she read a bedtime story, giving each girl a goodnight kiss, a simple, maternal gesture that mesmerized Matthew from the doorway. As he showed her to a lavish guest room, they exchanged quiet thanks, hers for the rescue, his for bringing joy back to his daughters. Lying in the soft bed, Sarah felt a fragile peace. Perhaps her life wasn't over. Perhaps, in this shattered family, she had found a place where she was needed exactly as she was. Sarah awoke to whispered giggles and the sight of 4 eager faces peeking into her room. She was swiftly dragged downstairs by the girls, who confessed their breakfasts were usually just cereal because Daddy burns everything. "How about pancakes?" Sarah suggested, sparking delighted chaos. The kitchen became a glorious mess of flour and laughter as the girls helped her cook. Matthew descended to this scene, the warm aroma of coffee and pancakes, his daughters beaming, and Sarah at the center of it all, wearing a dish towel apron and a genuine smile. He was rendered speechless by the warmth that had returned to his home. Over the breakfast the girls declared the best ever, Matthew observed quietly, a long-forgotten feeling stirring in his chest. Afterwards, Sophie led Sarah to her room to show her drawings. One picture depicted Matthew and the 4 girls. "But someone is missing," Sophie said softly, pointing to the blank space. "Mommy, she went to heaven." Sarah's heart ached with understanding. Then Sophie picked up a crayon. "Can I draw you?" Tears welled in Sarah's eyes as she nodded. In that moment, watching the little girl carefully add her figure to the family portrait, Sarah understood. She hadn't been rescued out of pity. She had been seen. She had a nurturing heart and a capacity to love that was desperately needed. Later, Matthew found her in the kitchen, calmly restoring order. "They adore you," he said simply. "And I adore them," she replied, meaning it completely. He looked at her, truly seeing her for the first time, not as a charity case, but as the missing piece. "Stay," he said, the word more a heartfelt request than an offer. "Not just for tonight. Stay and help me give them a home again. Let us be your family." Sarah looked into his tired, hopeful eyes and then towards the living room where the sound of the girls' play echoed. She had come here with nothing, deemed worthless for the one thing she couldn't do. Yet here, she was being offered everything for precisely who she was. She placed her hand in his. "Yes," she whispered, a true smile finally reaching her eyes. On Christmas Day, in the most unexpected way, Sarah found her worth, her purpose, and a family ready to love her, not for the children she could bear, but for the mother she could be.